Hi, this is David Nguyen, CEO of Brain Scanology. In this presentation, we will discuss how Genie can precisely measure the shape of corn kernels better than any other technology. And we will discuss how this advantage will revolutionize machine learning models that make predictions about genetic engineering and response to environmental stressors. For this study, we analyzed this figure from a paper by Wang et al. And our focus will be on the shape of the corn kernels as seen in rows B and C. First, let's talk about how Genie works. So if this is the outline of the object that you want to measure, you would upload it to Genie. And in this case, we use the radio grid system, meaning Genie defined the center of this object, and then it overlaid a radio grid system and found every intersection between the edge of the object and the grid line, such that you get the figure in step 3. And Genie then calculates the distance of every dot to the red dot, the origin, and then turns that into step 4. At this point, the fast Fourier transform is applied to this sinusoid wave to produce a frequency spectrum, as seen in step 5. And this frequency spectrum is a multi-dimensional representation of the shape that you began with in step 1. Now, one way to simplify this and turn it into a scalar value is to calculate an index based on these bins. The simplest index is to sum all bins into one number, or you can pick one bin and divide it by the other, for example, such as bin 1 divided by bin 2. And before we move on, we need to discuss very crucial methodological details. That is, after outlining the extraction, or after extracting the outline of each kernel, we made sure to then rotate it such that the base was at the bottom and the tip was at the top, and that the vertical line would divide the kernel as symmetrically as possible. Then we inputted into Genie and requested the radio grid processing system. Let's now look at what the data shows. So for these 6 strains, which we've named group 1 to 5, the index that results from dividing bin 2 over bin 3 is an index that captures the roundness of the kernel. As you can see here, this index has the highest magnitude in group 3 and the lowest in 1 and 4. And here you see in the dotted box, group 3 shows kernels that have very rounded edges, while groups 1 and 4 have more elongated squared edges. So this index captures roundness of the kernel. Another interesting index is bin 3 divided by bin 4. In this case, this index represents the squareness of the kernel. As you can see in the graph, groups 1 and 2 have very large values, while 3 has the smallest values. And visually, you can see that in the dotted line, the groups 1 and 2 have squared or squarish corners on their kernels, while group 3 has rounded corners. Next is bin 8, which captures what we think is rectangularity. That is, group 1 and 2 have large values, with this value decreasing as we move to group 5. And visually, what we can see is that the groups on the left, 1 and 2, have elongated rectangularity as a feature. And this feature diminishes as you move across the other groups. And then this next index, bin 3, captures it well. And here we measure the shape of these cross sections. Here, what look to be sagittal cross sections of these kernels. And this index captures what we consider elongated length, because you can see in group 3 and 4, they have the smaller values. And here you can see that the sagittal view of groups 3 and 4 are not flat rectangles. Lastly, bin 3 also captures the squareness of this axial cross-section of these kernels, as seen in the dotted lines. As you can see, for groups 3 and 4, they look very squarish, symmetrical like a square, while the other groups are more rectangular. So in conclusion, Genie can identify precise indices that quantify kernel shapes across different strains, and it can do so in ways that is very subjective to the human eye, but we can quantify it very precisely and quantitatively. And that thus far we've found indices that represent features such as roundness, squareness, rectangularity, and elongatedness. And these are features that traditional measures such as area and perimeter and even surface area have a hard time quantifying well. So what is the significance to maze research? Well, Shape Genie can quantify precise steps within a gradient of kernel shapes, which helps you find unknown subtypes of kernel shapes that then allow you to quickly train a deep learning model to quickly classify, right, those subgroups of shape. But first, Shape Genie helps you find what subgroups exist to begin with, because the human eye is really bad at identifying them. Secondly, Shape Genie can extract morphological features for a machine learning model to classify corn kernels based on strain or environmental conditions. Thirdly, kernel morphology is useful in optimizing growth conditions, such as resistance to environmental stressors, which can be due to pathogens, pesticides, pollution, or drought. Lastly, kernel morphology may be helpful in identifying whether corn is organically grown or exposed to pesticides, because these effects can have cause very subtle changes to morphology that's difficult for the human eye to pick out, but to a machine learning model, it can be done robustly and rapidly. To end, I just want to highlight a few other features that we could have measured, but we didn't. In this case, is the shape of these kernels from the top view. And here I have outlined a few examples to show you that though there seems to be variation, though there seems to be a similar theme of kernel shapes across these 5 strains, these representative shapes indicate that there are recurring patterns of shape that are distinct to each strain. And Shape Genie can readily pick this out. Another interesting feature to measure would be the contour, the outer contour, right, of the entire corn. Here we can compare the red shape up here to each other, or we could compare the contour of the green shape. Though to the human eye, these edges are just squiggly lines, we have found through Shape Genie that these recurring contour patterns can be precisely quantified and robustly stratified quantitatively, which is great for making machine learning predictions. That is the end of this video. Thank you for your attention, and we hope that Shape Genie helps you make amazing discoveries in your research.